Well, welcome to another edition of Highlander Hoops Weekly, everyone. I'm your host, Chris Stoner. Again, we'll be airing the show every Monday night for the remainder of the season. In addition to chatting with Coach Sturgeon each week, we'll have various player features. And today, actually, we're joined by an assistant coach. Ryan Miller is here joining us. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at FCHS_hoops. Highlander Hoops Weekly, proudly presented by Pete Palmer Law, located at 303 Scribner Drive in New Albany. Palmer Law, a proud supporter of Floyd Central basketball. And speaking of the Highlanders, we hope everybody was able to make it out to Joe Hinton Court over the weekend. 2 home games, 2 victories. One of those a conference victory, as Floyd stayed unbeaten in the conference with a 64-34 win over Seymour Friday night during homecoming. And then Saturday night versus Reitz, a 63-42 win over the Panthers from Evansville. Joined now by Coach Sturgeon. Coach, your team 16-1, 5-0 in the Hoosier Hills, ranked 4th in the state. As we look back at the weekend games, the win over Seymour, the win over Reitz, are there a couple things that really stand out for you that you were very happy with, and also a couple things that stand out that maybe you talked about today at practice that you really need to work on to get better this month?
Well, I think this, when you talk about things that I'm happy about, number one, we had a great crowd Friday with a phenomenal national anthem with the orchestra guys doing that, which really was unique. So that's one thing we're so fortunate here at Floyd with the talent of, whether you're talking about the Dazzlers, the cheerleaders, the band. You know, I get opposing coaches all the time talk about how good our band is. And then the orchestra kids to come in there and do that was really unique. So that was great. We won the 2 games combined by 50-something points. As a coach, you'll take that all the time. I thought we've begun to make perimeter shots at a little greater clip. Happy with that for sure. And I thought that in spots we've defended pretty well, something that we're going to see more and more, and possibly in the postseason, teams trying to, if not all out stall, certainly long possessions. And those are 2 teams with guards who you can't just go out and take the ball from them. And so you kind of have to just dig in without a shot clock and try to just get some stops and eventually get enough of a lead to where they're forced to hurry a little bit. So we faced that both times, at least in the first halves of those games. Actually into the second half in both of those games, with both coaches telling their guys, be patient, and trying to play smaller lineups to spread the floor and take advantage of our size wherever they could. So I was pleased that we were able to kind of, in both games, get control of those games early in the second half and then take it on to the finish line.
Speaking of defense, and we said we may just bounce this back and forth, joined now by assistant coach Ryan Miller. And Coach Miller, you're pretty obvious, anybody's been to a game and halfway pays attention, that you're very interested in the defense. Defensive end of the floor for Floyd, and spend a lot of time on that at practice and scouting. For teams that you're going to play in the sectional, that you've already played in the regular season, do you go into a game and prepare with multiple defenses, depending on what the team may throw at you, and also how much time do you put into planning, okay, well, this defense worked against New Albany, or this defense worked against Jeff. Now, if I was their coach, what would I do to beat that, and how can we make the adjustments so then we can be a step ahead?
Sure. I guess first I would say I think I've been, I know I've been very fortunate to have coached for 2 coaches now, in obviously Coach Sturgeon right now, and then before that Coach Lefebvre, who have both had similar outlooks and helped shape me, my mindset, my mentality, my understanding of the game, in its entirety, and certainly on the defensive end as well. I think when Coach Sturgeon and I first got together back 4 years ago, we started talking about that and realizing just how, again, you can still work together, work well with someone with differing philosophies, but it certainly helps when there are similar philosophies. And again, I right off the bat, I knew that Coach Sturgeon and I were not only going to get along, on a personal level, but also from the standpoint of valuing, a lot of the same things when it comes to basketball and defensively. And I've also been fortunate that, Coach Sturgeon trusts and values my input, which to me, obviously, as an assistant, motivates you even more, to try to help the program, in any way you can. So that's something I don't think all assistant coaches get all the time is a head coach who fully, puts belief and trust in you, and will actually, obviously as an assistant, one of your main jobs is to listen to the head coach and learn, and then carry out, the ideas, the philosophies of him and the program. But I think both myself and Coach Walters would agree that we're fortunate because Coach Sturgeon also listens to and values our thoughts and insights as well. So that's something I've certainly, I've learned a lot from him and Coach Lefebvre in that regard. Like, to have two great coaches who also realize, well, they're always open, to learning and improving. Mm-hmm. So then to your question, in terms of preparing for opponents and different defenses and things like, yeah, certainly I think that's always a wise thing to consider. Okay, what might this other team be thinking, right? So that you are prepared. Coach Sturgeon and I and Walters, we have those discussions on a regular basis. Also, however, things I've learned, from my mentors, Coach Lefebvre and Coach Sturgeon, where you need to be prepared for those things and understand what another team's strengths and weaknesses are. However, you also ultimately have to have an awareness for what your strengths and weaknesses are, right? And make sure that first, more is not always better, right? Sometimes what's best is doing what you do and doing that really well, So I think that's kind of been my philosophy as a coach, when I was learning, and then again I encountered Coach Sturgeon, and he too has that philosophy. Again, I think Coach Sturgeon's helped me to become a little more flexible because I was, under Coach Lefebvre. If anybody knew him or saw his teams play, they would understand that we do things typically just one way. And one way only. So I was a bit brainwashed, I think in a good way, to believe that. And I'm glad I had that experience and had that conviction to say, no, this is what we do and we're going to do it. However, being under Coach Sturgeon, it's rounded me out in other ways to realize, okay, yeah, there are other ways of doing things and being successful. And we're going to keep that in mind, but we're never going to lose sight of who and what we are.
I'm sorry, but you talked about changing defenses, and we do some of that. We play some zone, and on occasion when we've tried to speed teams up, I've used that 1-3-1 zone, which we started a couple of years ago. My whole coaching life had been with the shot clock, and so there was never any issue to try to speed a team up, except maybe at the very end of the game. So we've kind of experimented with that 1-3-1, but to your point, there's a fine line as a coach between realizing we need to change up and do something else, and then also having your guys have the mindset of, we're just going to dig in. We're not going to do it with smoke and mirrors, and the coaches aren't going to have this elaborate defense. We're going to be tougher than them, have more grit, smarter, and that's the way we're going to beat them. And if they keep scoring on us, you know what we're going to do? We're going to guard them a little harder and keep it the same way, that we're not going to trick them. We're just going to be tougher than them. And so as a coach, you're trying to balance that out with your team of knowing, and there is no magic formula. You're just trying to do it by feel and flying by the seat of your pants a little bit. And sometimes in the game, we better try something else because this isn't, it becomes obvious sometimes.
Right.
But there's always a fine line between that. And we have that conversation a lot during the games.
Well, Ryan, when you said you were coming from a mindset of we do it this way and that's that. When you came here to Floyd under Coach Sturgeon, and you've evolved a little bit in that respect. And I won't mention the player's name, but remember Coach Sturgeon saying a story of you got so mad at a certain player because they missed a few things on defense, and you hopped up and were ready to take him out. And Coach Sturgeon had to say, whoa, that player's scored about 8 straight points for us.
Yeah.
We have to have a little give and take here.
Yeah. Yeah.
and you didn't even realize that because you were so focused on the defensive end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you will draw my ire, you can have 30, but you make one mistake. Yeah.
Well, but that's Ryan's such a humble guy that it's nice to have that level of experience in our coaching staff. Greg Walters, we've got a guy that's got head coaching experience. He can take the JV team and, people ask me, like, what do you do during JV team? I just kind of talk to guys here and there and offer a few tips, but I don't even talk to him about how much a certain kid should, like, we got to get this guy an amount of playing time, because he and I agree on 90% of the decisions. And when we talk, we agree. Same way with Ryan and I kind of have a similar philosophy, and there might be small details here and there, but Ryan, if I took a nap while we're on defense, we'd be just fine. He could handle that, the offense too. And so we're really fortunate on our staff. Those guys take turns with the scouting, preparing for the next opponent ahead. And the fact that they really have the trust of the players, because the players know they do their homework and they can trust what these guys are telling them, and that these guys, when they get on them, they're putting in maybe not as much physical effort, but as much mental effort to us winning as the players are. And so we're really fortunate to have Ryan and Greg on our staff.
Next up for the Highlanders, Bedford North Lawrence on Thursday at Bedford. The Stars are 11-6 on the year, 4-1 in the Hoosier Hills Conference. They also had a double weekend this past weekend, a 74-47 loss at Jeffersonville. But the Stars bounced back Saturday night with a 63-47 win at Greenfield Central. Coach, what can you tell our listeners about Bedford?
Well, those people who were here last year when we beat them pretty handily here a year ago, they are a different team, even though they've got much the same person, because they were really young last year. So they've got mostly the same team back. Damon Bailey's son, in fact, he wears 22. Also, and when you're watching on video, it's kind of scary, has similar mannerisms of his dad, is a really good player, sophomore, great driver of the basketball. He's like a couple other guys that we play in that we know he's going right. He knows he's going right. Everybody knows he's going right, and he can still get by you going right. Like, he just has that knack and that quickness and that athletic ability and that toughness to do that. And then they got some other shooters around them. So they have a nice team on offense that's going to be a challenge for us. But their biggest difference is they defend infinitely better than they did a year ago. Last year they had a new coach, and I'm sure he had a lot of things that he was trying to get changed. It's hard your first year. You're just trying to kind of earn the trust of guys a little bit. This year they've lowered, I'd have to look exactly, but they're giving up 10 to 12 points less per game than they were a year ago, and scoring about the same. Well, that's a big difference. So especially going on the road to Bedford, that'll be a big challenge for us, and we're going to have to go play well.
Speaking of on the road at Bedford, looked up the stat. The last time Floyd won at Bedford was in 2008. Interested to know your opinion on that. Some coaches could care less. That was 10 years ago, well before your time. These players were in first grade, second grade at the time. They have no memory of that. But some coaches like to use little facts like that to motivate, just to remind guys, hey, a green and gold team hasn't won there in 10 years. Don't think you're going to walk up there and they're going to kiss your ring, is the phrase you've used. What's your view on that? Do you use little facts like that, or does that just mean nothing to you?
Sometimes. Again, I think that as a coach, I'm kind of out of the Bob Knight coaching tree, for those people that aren't familiar with me. My boss that I worked for 10 years, Royce Waltman, was a Knight assistant. Final game there, and when they won the 87 championship, Keith Smart hit the shot. If you're in a bar in Indiana and behind the bar there's that still the Keith Smart game winner, Coach Walton was sitting, he had to scout for that game and was sitting right beside Coach Knight. Well, those guys are all in the kind of function of the belief we're going to make every game the same, so that when the time comes and we get in tournament play, we don't have them all, at another level. We're not doing things differently. Our preparation for the game is going to be exactly the same. And so I think there's a lot of value in that, and we try to stick with that. But once in a while, and again, it's a little bit more art than science. I don't want to make this bigger than it is, but there's not a set formula. You just kind of have to get a feel for it. Like, boy, our team seems like they're not up for this game. They're not taking it serious. Maybe they need a little jab like, hey, you guys do know we haven't won over here since 2008. We might say that in that case. Otherwise, if we have a great week of practice and guys seem excited and energetic going in that game, I probably won't mention it, even though probably most of them are going to listen to this at some point. So now they know we've wasted our bullet. Barney Fife doesn't have his bullet anymore. I'll have to come up with something else.
So one good nugget, huh, that you had. Well, we mentioned you guys are at Bedford Thursday, short week. I know Monday, later in the season, you guys have said you like to go a little lighter, do weight room work. How does that change your approach? Is the Tuesday practice going to be a hard all-out practice, and then Wednesday is a little lighter, more shooting and more walkthrough, or how do you guys approach that with a short week?
Yeah, the Tuesdays, 2 days before we play on Thursday, that'll be our big work day. And so hopefully we take advantage of that. We didn't have a great week of practice last week. Had been really good before that. I guess it's just natural. You're probably not going to have 16 straight great weeks of practice. That's probably unrealistic, even though you always are thinking you're going to do that. So I thought last week we weren't as good. Cautiously optimistic. We went shorter tonight and lifted afterwards. But I thought guys were pretty wired for what we needed to get done tonight. So I'm hoping we come back. Tomorrow will be a big defensive work day. The day before is a little bit more offensive dress rehearsal and walking through. Often we don't defend live the day before. Now that we've gotten to this point in the season, up through Christmas, we continue to do that. But at this point, especially when we're playing Friday and Saturday, so if we went hard the day before the Friday game, then you're going like 3-4 days in a row. And I guess like racehorses, we want to save their best for race day, hopefully.
Right. Coach Miller, I want to touch on something you said earlier about a lot of times you just need to know your strengths as a team or as a player and stick with that and dig in and not too much of the smoke and mirrors, as Coach Sturgeon alluded to. How important is that if you were talking to younger players, maybe freshmen and below, or even your current high school players, that, hey, practice or individual stuff is when you need to work on your weaknesses. But gosh, when it's game time, if you're struggling with that one dribble pull-up jumper, maybe that's not what you go to. In other words, when it's game time, you need to go with what's working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're kind of describing there is a mindset, and it's really our mantra that Coach Sturgeon says. It's the team, the team, the team. It's all about the team. So once the season starts, it truly is all about the team. So if it's not the time to be, now you can stay after practice and work on some things, right? But yeah, to your point, obviously it's incredibly important to take note of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. But as you said, the time to work on the weaknesses and be serious about that is during the off season. Once the season starts, like when you're on the floor, you're going to do what you do well, or you can watch from the sidelines.
Right.
Yeah, because it's all about the team.
Well, Coach, let's talk about you a little bit. 1999 graduate of Providence. First question, how hard is it? Because Providence and Floyd, over many years, and nothing has changed today, are big rivals.
Yeah.
Fans really get up for those games. How hard was it for you to put on the green and gold and then eventually coach against your alma mater?
Oh, yeah, I think it's kind of funny, just that, again, I think oftentimes you can have two groups of people that are so very similar, but, view the other as different, right? I think that's kind of just natural with a lot of us in life. And usually you realize that was an erroneous belief, right? But yeah, I was younger then, when I was at Providence for a long period of time. And yeah, Floyd is a serious rival. And I know Floyd still views Providence as a rival, and now obviously having to see it from both sides, it's it's something unique, a unique story. My first year at Floyd, I had it was the Floyd New Albany game, so I'm sitting there on the bench, and a group of Providence kids come walking in, boys that I had actually just coached the year before. I'd actually worked with them since they were in junior high. They came in with all their Providence gear, and this girl said something to the effect of, like, man, don't those guys realize that nobody likes them here? Right? And she was kind of saying it in a lighthearted fashion. But of course they went by the Floyd Central section and they heard it from them, and then they walked past the New Albany section and they heard it from them as well. But yeah, so again, I think coming over here though, you just at first it was like, walking into the Floyd Central gym and being on this side of it, it was a little different. But again, you quickly become accustomed to, like, this becomes your place now, right. And it happens rather quickly. And not that I still have a great deal of respect, and there'll always be a place in my heart for Providence as well, being that I went to school there, played there, everybody, family went there.
We're going to edit that part out, by the way.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Yeah, and I obviously coached there for a long time. But yeah, now that I'm at Floyd, and actually the reason I'm at Floyd is because of another Providence connection. Tom Goman was a Providence guy. He came up here to Floyd, and so now we're both up here together. And Tom, who actually played for Coach Sturgeon at the University of Indianapolis. So yeah, it's kind of it's funny and interesting to see things from both sides, and you realize that we're actually not that different.
Well, Coach Miller, another interesting thing I think that you can give us some outlook on is you played, now correct me if I'm wrong, the first couple of years of your high school career would have been single class still.
That's right.
And you would have been at the Jeff Sectional,
That's correct.
If I'm remembering.
Yeah.
And then your last couple of years was class ball.
Right.
And then Providence in 2A.
Yep.
Would have went to, well, I'm not sure, where was it back then? Do you remember where your sectional was?
Well, our sectional, then actually we were 3A.
We were 3A, and you were 3A at that point. Corden or North Harrison.
Yeah. So then it was actually at Scottsburg when they had it rolling.
Right.
Some top 10 teams in the state, and
right.
Yeah.
So so looking back, so class ball's, that's not going anywhere. That's
sure.
20 years later.
Yeah.
It's here to stay.
Yeah.
People still argue about the pros and cons. So you played 2 years of single class,
right?
Going to the Jeff sectional, 2 years of class ball when Providence was 3A, as you mentioned,
right?
And now they're 2A, and now you coach at a 4A school,
yeah.
And you see just how tough the 4A sectional is.
Oh yeah.
What are your views on class ball from playing in it in one way, playing in the other, from coaching at a quote smaller school,
right?
You've played in the single class sectional, you played in a 3A sectional, you coached in 2A sectionals, and now you're coaching in 4A sectionals.
Yeah.
So what's your view on single class versus class ball, smalls, bigs? What is it?
Right. Yeah. I think it's all fun. It was fun when it was single class, and I grew up going all those years. Even when I was a little kid, my dad would always end up at Seymour as Coach Sturgeon played in those sectionals and regionals. When he was back in, when was that, Coach? Was that in the?
There you're gonna get. Both you guys are gonna go there. In the 50s.
Is that when the lane?
By the way, we're gonna edit this out for sure. 1983, Ryan. You smart aleck.
Yeah. So Coach Sturgeon was actually on some really good Brownstown teams, like really good teams, and they actually played really good Floyd Central team, in regionals at the Seymour, and that's what I grew up going to, watching those regional battles, there at Seymour, with the likes of Floyd Central, New Albany, Jeffersonville, Bedford. When Coach Sturgeon was there, Brownstown, obviously, and all the other good programs. So that was awesome, and of course there was such it's Hoosier hysteria, right? So I recall those memories, very, very vividly. And it was awesome. Obviously, you can now, especially coming from the smaller school, Providence, you do see how, I think a lot of it is clearly just your perspective, like where you're at, right? If you're one of the big schools, you long for the days of old when, and it was a little bit different then too, right? I mean, like Hoosier hysteria was, in its fullest glory, right? And it was awesome. They'd say, well, if you won a sectional, that was a really, really big deal. Yeah. If you were a small school and you won that sectional, it's almost like, going to a state championship now, right? I mean, some people might disagree with that, but that's kind of the...
No, I having grown up at a small school in one-class basketball, I can tell you our goal was to win the sectional. We weren't, in fact, the guys in my group that lost to Floyd Central in the championship game of the regional, what we always say to each other is we hadn't set our goal high enough. Mm-hmm. We didn't realize we could have done more, and we lost by 3 points to Floyd Central in the championship game of the regional. And we were so excited about when, we should have been setting up. But for 30 years, just winning the sectional would have been an unbelievable thing at Brownstown. And so, so it was in a lot of communities, the sectional was your championship because you knew that next level was probably going to be something that was a pipe dream.
Right. Yeah.
Well, guys, we could talk about that for a long time. That's good stuff. I want to wrap up this edition of Highlander Hoops Weekly presented by Palmer Law with looking at the February schedule. So we mentioned the short week to prepare for Bedford on Thursday, and then you have 9 days till your next game on February 10th. And then if you break down the schedule, I don't know if you've looked that far ahead, you have, I think, 5 games in like a 12-day span. So how will you guys, looking just past the Bedford game for a moment, handle that 9-day break, if you will? And will you give the team, have you thought about some off days or a off day or have some light practices knowing that you're going to hit a stretch of 5 games in 12 days?
Yeah, we're going to have to really balance that because you're spot on. You're trying to balance with this will be our last chance to get any rest leading up to anything more than Sunday off. It'll be the last chance for that. It'll also be the last chance for us to get any serious work and to genuinely get better because you're going to just be preparing for the next game. You're going to be doing scouting reporting. How are we going to defend, Evansville, Harrison, and then Brownstown, St. X, whoever's on down the road there of those games. So to really genuinely work. So it's going to be our best chance to get rest and our best chance to work hard, and our best chance to work on our conditioning. We've seen that early in the season we thought our conditioning was really good. We had a little bit of the flu and things going through our team, and we feel like maybe after the Jeff game our conditioning had slipped, and we need to get that back. So I don't have an answer for you. We're going to try to take at least 2 days off during that stretch.
And then go for double or triple sessions.
And then maybe in case any of the players are listening here, like Saturday doubles seems like a logical
Come back on a Wednesday night at 8:30 and lift.
Exactly.
That would be good, right?
I think that'd be a great idea.
Coach Miller will be in the weight room. I can tell you that. Yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Ryan, thanks for joining us. This wraps up another edition of Highlander Hoops Weekly. Again, presented by Pete Palmer Law. And again, the studio Pete's put us in is just fabulous. He finally got me one of those old-time Johnny Carson microphones I've always wanted. So I very much appreciate that. Kudos to Palmer Law for supporting Floyd Central basketball. We can't thank Pete enough, although we'll try throughout the season. So no doubt about that. For Coach Sturgeon and Coach Miller, I'm Chris Stoner saying so long. Be sure and try to make it up to Bedford Thursday night. Where else would you rather be than drive over an hour back roads and make it up to Bedford and root on the Highlanders as they look to stay undefeated in the Hoosier Hills Conference? Until then, so long, everybody.